All right, so we have a very special guest today. Someone space news fans will instantly recognize, the absolute best space journalist out there. He writes a lot about SpaceX industry and it has deep insights, knowledge, and connections with the people in the space. He's also the author of two amazing best-selling books on SpaceX, Liftoff and Reentry. And in fact, I just got Reentry all the way back from the States. I really hope it gets translated to Korean so more people here can enjoy this amazing work. But yeah, if you really want to understand what's going on in space, this is the person you need to listen to. Senior Space Editor at Ars Technica, Mr. Eric Berger, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to talk to you today.
Most of our audience today are really into investing in U.S. tech stocks, and the recent theme evolving in the market has definitely been space. And I thought your insights would be invaluable. So thank you again for joining. Why don't we start with SpaceX? So you are the ultimate authority on this topic right now. Your article at Ars Technica was spot on, and Elon himself replied to you saying that your assessment was accurate as usual. So first of all, that must have felt really good. Can't imagine how that would feel like. But yeah, I mean, your assessment was right in the money. So SpaceX has been avoiding IPO, but not anymore. What's your take on this? What has changed?
I think there's a couple of factors that kind of came together. One of them is that Elon clearly believes that AI is going to revolutionize his business activities across the spectrum, from automobiles to rockets to tunneling to Neuralink. And so he wants to capitalize on this moment when it's kind of everything he's been working for the last couple of decades is coming together. So I think he was looking for an influx of capital to do that. I think there's other motivations as well. One of them is that he really wants to beat Sam Altman and OpenAI in the AI space. And so bringing SpaceX and, immediately raising tens of billions of dollars in capital to deploy toward this problem, really goes a long way toward helping to win that fight. Mm-hmm. I think the other thing, another really unappreciated fact, I think, is the reality that he's now in his early to mid 50s.
Right.
Father time comes for us all. I'm 1 year younger than Elon, so I can kind of, feel the same way that he does about all that. And, he's been pushing to settle Mars now for almost a quarter of a century.
Yep.
They've come a long way. They have a long way to go. And so I think he sees this as a way to actually accelerate that process.
Yeah, so it's a great timing for their IPO. And it's really interesting how, the overall space is now emerging with this AI theme. So Elon publicly laid out an idea of having multiple satellites at the LEO with GPU installed in them and, making a constellation of satellites network. When do you think we will see the first AI data centers in space? How do you project the timeline? Is it like a 5-year thing or longer?
I mean, I could see, we're already seeing, test satellites go up to sort of prove out some of these technologies. And I think that you could see a modified Starlink satellite within the next 18 to 24 months. So I don't think this is like a half a decade or decade-long project. I mean, the reality is that some of the most difficult problems with data centers in space are building large satellites, building the sophisticated means for the satellites to talk to one another in the ground, and having ready-made launch capabilities. The reality is that because SpaceX has put 8,000 Starlink satellites into space over the last half decade, they're ready to go on all those fronts. And so we don't know how much of this technology they've already been working on in-house for basically a modified Starlink satellite capable of serving as a data center. But, if this is something they're interested in, I suspect that, if he's going to do an IPO within the next 12 months, he's going to want to have a tech demo
of
this ready. So I think we're going to see it pretty quickly, probably more quickly than some people think.
I see. So, yeah, I mean, I believe this startup called StarCloud has already has their NVIDIA H100 GPUs and I just read an article that they demonstrated this LLM capabilities based on the space data centers like I don't know, 2 months ago. So
They launched a demo satellite on a Falcon 9 rocket rideshare.
oh, right.
Use SpaceX to get there. But yeah, they've demonstrated a capability. But I think, it's technologically, this is doable, right? So, I mean, it's great that they demonstrated it, but it's really difficult to go from a tech demo to actually deploying a full-size data center and then deploying hundreds or thousands of these data centers. You need a large constellation. And so, again, I think where SpaceX has a big advantage over everyone else in this area is the fact that they've already done it. And they have the tools in place to build the satellites and the means to get them into space and the technology to do it. And also just the experience working in that domain. I mean, space operations is very challenging.
Yeah.
And they've been operating spacecraft in space now for 15 years.
Right. So you highlighted that StarCloud was on the right share of Falcon 9 launches. So it sounds like the launch capabilities might be the ultimate bottleneck here when it comes to AI data centers in space. So, I mean, like there must be a reason why those big names, Eric Schmidt, Jeff Bezos, of course, and even Sam Altman is looking into investing in his new space startup. So SpaceX will definitely have huge advantage over this, right?
Yeah, launch is absolutely a bottleneck. We've already seen it with the mega constellations. So, when Amazon was trying to get its Project Kuiper broadband satellites, now Amazon Leo is what it's called, they signed big contracts with United Launch Alliance, Blue Origin, and Arianespace, French or Europe-based provider. And so far, those companies were all developing sort of medium to heavy lift rockets that would have some capacity for these Amazon satellites. And so far, none of them have done it. The only way the Amazon's gotten to space is with Falcon 9 and with some old Atlas V rockets that are almost out of those at United Launch.
I see.
So already that medium to heavy lift commercial capability was booked up probably through almost the rest of the 2020s. Wow. So yes, you're having to compete not just on technology, but on getting into space. And you're right. Like, I think one of the reasons Eric Schmidt bought Relativity Space about 12 months ago is he wanted a medium to medium heavy lift rocket, the Terran R, to because you don't want to be reliant on your competitor to get into space, because that's a losing proposition economically. Right. And the same thing with Sam Altman. There was a report that he was talking to Stoke Space, and that's a U.S. company building a fully reusable rocket. Great company. I love the people working there. They great vision. But their first rocket is going to have a capacity of about 4 tons to low Earth orbit, or maybe 8.
4 tons.
And that's like, just a tiny amount of what even like a Falcon 9 can do versus like a Starship rocket. And Stoke still has a couple years to go, probably before they reach operational capability with that Nova rocket. Yeah. So launch is a huge bottleneck.
So I think, it's going to be really important. And I mean, Starship payload is sitting at about 150 tons, if I'm right.
Well, it's probably the V3 is probably about 100. They're going to upgrade to a V4, which will be more 100, 150. It'll be like the Falcon 9 over time. Falcon 9 started out with about 15 tons to orbit, and now it's almost 25. And so it just becomes more capable over time.
So you definitely expect launch costs will continue to go down. I mean, SpaceX is already delivering launches 10 times cheaper than the regular launches. Do you think there's more?
The launch costs for satellites really haven't gone down that much. SpaceX brought them down some with the Falcon 9 rocket, quite a bit actually for things like Iridium. The Iridium constellation. But since then, they've kind of plateaued because there's been no competition, especially when the Russian rockets were taken off the Western market. So after Russia invaded Ukraine, no one could work with Russia to launch on Soyuz or Proton vehicles anymore. So literally for about 3 years, the only capacity in the Western world was the Falcon 9 rocket. So SpaceX didn't have any incentive to bring down the prices. Now, internally, like they probably sold OneWeb launches. So OneWeb is another mega constellation provider, only true competitor right now to Starlink. They sold OneWeb, I think maybe 3 launches, and I'm going to ballpark it at like maybe $75 million for that launch. Internally, their launch cost on a Falcon 9 rocket for Starlink is $15 million. So that's why if you're building your own constellation, whether it's internet constellation in space or data centers, you better have your own launch vehicle, because you just can't, you cannot compete with those economics.
So pretty much dominance over the rocket launch industry. Let's go over to SpaceX valuation. So it is being talked that it's going to go IPO at about $1.5 trillion, and some people argue that's overvalued. How would you respond to them? Do you think their view is too Earth-centric, maybe?
I mean, first of all, I am not an economics guy or finance guy or a trader. I'm a humble space reporter who's had to learn some financial stuff over the last 10 years as space has really become much more commercial. But I would just say, I think there's a couple of things driving SpaceX's valuation. First of all, really the economic potential of space, orbit, the moon, Mars, asteroids is pretty difficult there's no real upper boundary on that, right?
Right.
You could say the sky's the limit, but actually the sky's not the limit. And the other thing is that like SpaceX really is dominant in launch, satellite communication, and transportation in space right now. Like there's no competitors. Now there are companies that are rising up to try to compete, and we'll see how they do. So SpaceX has a dominant position in this industry. They have a proven track record, and it's this growth industry. So I understand why they're valued. Could you make a case that that's an overvalued? I'm sure you could, based upon their revenues and so forth. But they're full of potential.
I see. So, I mean, yeah, it seems like there's a very solid foundation as for why we need to go into space, especially with the AI demand. I mean, I personally believe that AI is not a bubble, and I think the demand is only going to go parabolic. So there has to be a way to meet that demand likely with free energy using solar. So
it's a great question, and one that I really hope to explore over this year, next year, because technically and economically, it's a lot more expensive to build data centers in space. It's just, yes, the energy is free. You can get like almost 6 times the amount of solar incidence on your solar panels than you can on the surface of the Earth because of cloud cover, nighttime, all that stuff.
Yeah.
So yes, there's a lot of free energy, but it's difficult to get up there. You can't really repair these things, and if a rack of computers in an Earth-based data center are out of date, you just kind of go in there, rip them out, and put some new ones in. You can't really do that in space. So I think those are all concerns. Where I do think you have a major advantage in space is on the environmental side of things, because I think there's a lot of NIMBYism already in the United States and probably elsewhere in the world for these data centers. I mean, I wouldn't want to live anywhere near one. I don't think most people would. They're driving up energy costs, which is going to become a political issue, for sure. And so I just think over time, resistance to building more of these here will grow. And if you can get a permit for 1,000 of them in space pretty easily, then that solves a big permitting problem. So, we'll see. I don't think that story has been told yet, and I'm not convinced that the business case closes for data centers in space. But there's a lot of people trying, and when you have Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and other people saying, pretty smart technical people saying, no, this is where we're going in the future, then you have to consider this a serious possibility.
Right. So, aside from the AI data center in space, which is very visible now, any other opportunities or market that is forming in the space industry? Setting the Mars topic for later, we'll get there. But what kind of market opportunities exist in the intermediate steps before we actually get to Mars?
So, I'll say a couple. First, on the civil space side, NASA is really interested in abilities, services that will advance its lunar plans, like to settle, to build a lunar outpost, and build up commercial activity on the surface of the moon. So I think that's that's really an area for companies to grow in. But I think the bigger opportunity probably is on the Department of Defense side, the military, because President Trump has talked about building Golden Dome. We'll see if that happens, but that's hundreds of billions of dollars in new space-based funding that dwarfs what NASA spends on the civil side. So I think, launching these interceptors, building these interceptors, and sort of managing this whole system, huge opportunities for ground-based operations to support the space side and for the space-based services.
I see. So as of now, not so much of a commercial sector, you think? I mean, so the entire space industry is still yet reliant on government budget, would you say?
Well, I think two things have changed that. First of all, the mega constellation, so Starlink and Amazon Leo are really rapidly changing that. You're starting to see a lot of commercial money flowing into space. Right now, most of that's going to SpaceX, right, because they have the constellation that's really delivering that. But I do think data centers is a huge opportunity. If you look at the amount of money that companies are spending on Earth for these, tens of billions of dollars in investments, that's a lot more than has existed in civil space before. So I think that's a huge opportunity for these companies.
So you talked about U.S. having an interest in building this lunar outpost. So let's talk about moon. So I recently saw Jared Isaacman, the new NASA administrator's post on X. He said that U.S. is going to build a moon base. Why? Is it just like a new Cold War thing with China, or we actually see something economically viable up there? Like what are some potentials on the moon?
That's a great question. And there's a couple reasons that he's saying that. First of all, it's what Congress wants to do. So he's really responding to feedback he's gotten from senators over the last 12 months as he's gone through the confirmation process. They want a sustained presence on the surface of the moon. There's also other reasons. Yes, the United States is in a competition with China to not just get back to the moon, which I think China has a pretty good shot at winning, but also to build sort of a sustained presence or an outpost at the South Pole of the moon. And why there? Because you can get solar power, almost all the time from certain locations there. And then there are these permanently shadowed regions within craters where there's believed to be large amounts of water ice, which is a valuable resource in space. So the thinking is that in the 60s, the United States went to the moon and planted flags and walked and left footprints. And so the idea now and going back is to have a much more sustained presence. Now, the question you asked is why?
Yeah.
and it's not clear to me, and I don't think it's clear to Jared Isaacman, exactly what is valuable there for humans to do, like what kind of value they will be able to create to sort of, justify a sustained long-term presence there. Because it's a lot more expensive to have people working at the moon than, say, it is to work at the South Pole on the United States, right, in Antarctica. So it's going to, we're going to have to find reasons for humans to be there, but I don't think we're going to really know those until we go there and see if they exist.
I see. What do you say about helium-3? There are some people talking about helium-3 on moon.
Yeah, there's a company called Interloon and another company as well that are looking to mine helium-3. This exists in pretty small amounts across the lunar surface, but the thinking is that it can be harvested and processed and sent back to Earth. It became popularized because an Apollo astronaut named Jack Schmitt, he was on the final Apollo mission. Sort of for a long time it's talked about using helium-3 as for nuclear fusion, for fission power here on Earth, as a fuel source. And I just don't think we're going to be able to mine enough of it anytime soon on the moon to support that. However, helium-3 is also super useful to cool things down to near absolute zero. So it's very useful for high temperature superconductors and other materials that require cooling. And so there is some economic value if it can be harvested. I think it's going to be really difficult and tough for those companies to close a business case, but we'll see. I mean, they're giving it a shot.
So it seems like it's more of a national flex, like back in 1960s, after the Sputnik moment, U.S. Sent astronauts to the moon. So now and then now U.S. is trying to set a post there on lunar before China does. Seems like so.
I mean, the United States has been working on this moon program for a long time. Its roots go back 20 years,
Right.
back when just about the time when China launched its first astronaut into space. And so I think just it's floundered a lot, so it's given China time to catch up. So I wouldn't say that China was the driving factor, but it is certainly an important factor, increasingly sort of spurring Congress and NASA to really get behind this effort.
Got it. So while that Artemis 2-3 project is rolling, I think Elon will definitely fuel capital into their Mars ambition, which is his ultimate goal. So based on the latest Mars plan that was released during the latest Starbase update last year, they announced that they will launch 5 landers to Mars by the end of 2026. And that is this year. And potentially scaling up that number to 20 landers by the end of 2028, going into 29. So let's talk about this year. Do you see that happening? Launching
No.
5? No?
No, I would be happy to see one lander on Mars in the 2028 window.
Okay.
I mean, the reality is to send a Starship to Mars, you have to refuel it in low Earth orbit.
Right.
With a certain number of Starships, probably at least 8 to 10.
So including the lower Earth orbit refueling, what needs to happen for us to see landers landing in Mars? Like, I'm sure there's more challenges that need to be solved.
There are a lot of things, but the main one is, first of all, you have to get Starship orbital and flying frequently. So you need to get through this development phase where you're blowing up rockets, or they're failing to reach orbit. So you need to get a Starship version 3 that is reliable and can get orbit. And then the next key test is this Starship refueling test. And so basically what that is going to be is you're going to have one Starship take off from Starbase, and then a short while later another Starship takes off from Starbase, and the 2 upper stages basically mate in space, come together, and one transfers propellant to the other. And that will be a very important demonstration of the efficiency of that transfer, boil off, and other concerns. And it's something like that's never been attempted before by anyone on a big scale. And there's lots of theories and engineering about how it should work, but we don't know how it will. And so my hope is that test happens sometime in the second half of this year.
I see.
But, the reason why I don't think they're going to do a Mars launch this year, pretty confident, is because you would need to do that on a grand scale, right? You can't just do a demonstration. You would need to do that 10 or 12 times and send the ship off to Mars.
Right. So basically, I mean, I've seen the air refueling with the fighter jets. They're basically doing the space version of that with much huge vehicles.
Well, it's not just much larger quantities of propellant. It's also propellants at super cold temperatures.
Oh, right.
So it's much more difficult to handle that. And you would think, well, hey, space is 2.7 degrees Kelvin, right? It's cold, and yes, it is. But in the sun, it's hot. So you get lots of boil off. So heating is a concern in space, paradoxically.
I see. Well, okay, so I know Elon's timeline is always very optimistic. I know that because I've been a long-term Tesla shareholder, so I always keep that in mind. So if we're lucky, we might see one lander going up to Mars by 2028. If that happens, what is your bet on payload? So there's going to be I don't know, maybe I'm projecting too much, 50, 75 tons of the basic initial infrastructure layer. Do you think I believe there will be Tesla Optimus in the payload for sure?
I would bet on a Cybertruck. Optimus, but potentially, yes. I would think there would be some NASA experiments. But yeah, there's going to be a lot of payload, and we'll see what happens. If you look back at Falcon Heavy, back in 2018, the debut launch, SpaceX offered NASA a free ride to space for one of its satellites, and NASA didn't take it.
Uh-huh.
That was one of the reasons why we ended up launching Elon's cherry red Tesla.
Right.
But I think there will be more interest, at least to do some smaller scale experiments on this first Starship, and I do think there will be cross branding with Tesla, certainly.
Yeah, I see some convergence there for sure. Yeah. So people might ask though, why we need to even become multiplanetary. I mean, this is the Elon's goal, ultimate goal. But I'm just wondering how you think Elon will persuade the public, because I believe, convincing the general public is part of very important stuff as a public company. Like, what kind of business ideas do you think he will lay out to lure the commercial sectors when it comes to building up in Mars?
So first of all, I don't think there is any compelling commercial reason to send humans to Mars.
Okay.
There's no resources on Mars that we don't have here on Earth. So we're venturing forth in the unknown. I do think that if humans were to go to Mars, it would be a unique environment for human inventiveness. So we would solve problems there, like, to live and thrive and explore Mars. We would sort of make technological advancements that then could be sold back here on Earth. So I do think like that would be kind of this great petri dish for technological advancement, biological, environmental, all these sorts of things that would have benefits back here on Earth.
Yeah.
But, the reality is there is no commercial reason for us to go to Mars. And I think that's another reason why, if he believes data centers will ultimately be super profitable, then that is more revenue he can put toward sort of a human settlement on Mars. At the end of the day, that is something that SpaceX is going to have to underwrite in a big way, because NASA's not going to step in to do that. It's not part of NASA's mission is to settle Mars.
So basically, SpaceX will have to figure out how to profit off their Starlink mega constellation and also the AI data center as a service to third party, maybe to just bring a profit and just fuel the capital into Mars project. There's, just to, explore, basically.
Yes.
I see. I really look forward to the future, how it would unfold. And I mean, space was always something that was very sci-fi. I mean, I believe in Elon Musk, so I knew, something would happen eventually, but it was always not really tangible. But it's wild how much, of this come back to Elon. I mean, we wouldn't even be having this kind of conversation if he hadn't paved the way with SpaceX. So
SpaceX, which he deserved an enormous amount of credit for, obviously, has really changed the world in terms of space.
Yeah, indeed.
Completely rewritten the rules.
Yeah. So since you have experience interacting with Elon in person, I'm really curious to know what your experience has been on a personal level. I mean, I think he's arguably an individual that will be remembered in centuries, like along with Da Vinci or Einstein. I truly believe in that. And what's different about Elon? What's your impression interacting with such a person?
I mean, he's kind of like this giant geek. He can be very funny. He can also be very intimidating, and he has mood swings. So if he's in a good mood, it's really fun to be around him. And if he's in a pretty bad mood, then it's pretty intimidating. I would just say that he's exceptional at sort of seeing around the corner of what's coming. Looking into the future and seeing kind of where the world is going and then building toward that future. When you talk to him, he's always sort of trying to look around the next corner.
Yeah.
And one of the few people I've ever talked to where you just sort of like really have to be on your A game because you don't want to say something dumb, because if you do, he just kind of shuts you off. Like, why am I wasting my time talking to this person who,
I see. Yeah, I mean, I think he definitely has some sort of a clairvoyance. I mean, when he first announced with Tesla that they're going to do a humanoid robot back in 2020, it seemed like a joke, but now everybody's into it. So he's definitely a visionary. Yeah. So this conversation has been incredibly insightful with so many interesting topics. Before we wrap up, I absolutely have to ask you this. You have interacted with countless key players and studied deeply within the space industry. So, from short-term shifts to long-term visions, such as I don't know, Tesla Optimus breaking ground on Mars, what kind of world do you see us living in a decade or two?
You know, I talk to the visionaries. I'm certainly not a visionary. I do think we're going to exist in a world where increasingly we get more and more of our services from space. And maybe we don't realize it, how much we already rely on space now, but it is clear that we are moving lots of telecommunications, probably lots of computing power, and increasingly industry into space, and I think that's a good thing. So I just think that you know, if you followed the space industry for a long time, there was all this talk and some interesting things were happening, but it seems like we've reached an inflection point where things are just really taking off.
Right.
And I think the big change maker in that was Starlink. It's just, I don't think anyone expected it to be this successful this fast. And so I think it's just really changed the game.
Such an exciting time to live in. Eric Berger, everybody, thank you so much for taking your time out and sharing your insights.
Thank you.